Hello, my name is Dr. Kelsey Ralph, and today I'm going to be talking about building support for traffic safety. The motivation for this work is rather simple. We know what we need to do, and we know where we need to do it. Nevertheless, not much has happened. The purpose of this talk is to explore why not. I should say from the outset that these are ideas still in development. I have mostly speculation, and I'm afraid I have more questions than answers. But I'm looking forward to continuing to think through these ideas together. The reasons for an action are obviously complex and multifaceted. As humans, we are naturally drawn to stories that hold individuals accountable. We struggle to think in terms of systems, and I've spoken about this issue in the past, particularly when it comes to how we describe crashes in the media and our tendency to get distracted by the idea of distracted pedestrians. We also have a decision-making process with rules and systems that prioritize cars and road building over road users who are more vulnerable. Finally, we also have a public participation process that has multiple opportunities to stall or obstruct safety improvements. A small number of participants can simply hijack the process. Each of these issues could be an entire talk on their own, but today I want to focus on a different issue. My argument today is simple. Most victims are other people, and we just don't care about other people all that much. My argument rests on 3 points. First, most Americans don't walk or bike. Based on nationwide data, just 10% of trips are made by walking and just 1% by biking. But it's hard to think about national averages because some people in some cities walk and bike quite a lot, while the remainder essentially never walk or bike. For this reason, I find it helpful to think about travel types rather than averages. My research has shown that the vast majority of Americans use a car for essentially every trip, and only a small fraction are multimodal. As a result, most Americans exclusively see their city from behind a windshield. Sure, they walk through surface parking lots and some of them walk their dogs, but this does not build a constituency for targeting crash hotspots. The second point is that people who walk or bike in America are other. To other someone is to view a person or group of people as intrinsically different from or alien to oneself. To understand othering, we need to know who walks and bikes in America today. Again, I'm going to share national statistics, which includes many affluent people in dense urban areas, Manhattan, DC, San Francisco. But keep in mind that these areas are highly walkable, but they contain less than 4% of the US population. It's the difference between walking here and here. Outside of these areas, the demographic differences between people driving and people walking or biking are much, much starker. As you can see here, people who walk and bike in America tend to have lower household incomes. We also know that walking is most prevalent among those with limited education. That's those with a high school degree or less. These demographic patterns bring up 2 related points. First, the people who do the most walking and biking in the United States do not have a lot of political power. And second, people who are able to do so protect themselves from inhospitable walking and biking conditions. When they do walk, they have a very different experience from the more typical road user. For the most part, they do not see road safety problems as their problems. The third big point is that everything else equal, safety improvements are inconvenient. I want to be clear that I think that these changes in speed are worth the inconvenience, but we need to be real about the challenges we face politically. Many safety advocates, myself included, would like to reduce speeds because they make crashes less common and less severe. But traveling 1 mile at 30 miles per hour takes 2 minutes. Traveling at 20 miles per hour takes 3. That doesn't seem like much, and on any given street it isn't really. After all, we waste countless minutes each day. but it becomes a bit tricky politically because Americans drive so much. We know that the typical driver in America drives 29 miles per day on average. Let's call it 30 for simplicity. And let's assume that the distribution of miles looks something like this: 10 miles on the highway, 10 miles on arterials, 5 on commercial streets like downtowns, and 5 on neighborhood streets. Again, this is just an estimate, and the actual distribution of miles will differ by person, location, and day. At prevailing speed limits, this trip would take 43 minutes per day. As a reference, that is slightly faster than the 55 minutes per day that the average driver actually spends in their car. Although, of course, some of that's due to congestion, which we're going to ignore here. So what would happen to travel times if we lowered speed limits to meet our traffic safety goals? Let's leave highway miles alone and focus instead on the other streets. I've picked speed limits that are 10 miles per hour lower for the arterials and down to 20 miles per hour for the neighborhood streets. In total, this amounts to a travel time 10 minutes longer per day. Now, it's not earth-shattering, but it would feel inconvenient, especially if you can imagine a parent hurrying from work to shuttle one kid to soccer practice and another to swimming. More dramatic speed reductions would bring us closer to our Vision Zero goals, but would eat up even more time. When you put these three facts together, we have a big political problem. The people who stand to benefit don't have much power, and the people who need to sacrifice don't see themselves as beneficiaries. The question is, how do we convince people to give up something for someone else? Our current approaches aren't working, and I'm thinking about two in particular. The first is a moral call to action to care about vulnerable road users. But to be blunt, caring about vulnerable people is not something that the American public has historically done all that well. A second approach I've seen is the argument that everyone should care about improving conditions for pedestrians because everyone is a pedestrian at some point. I think this argument is well-intentioned, but ultimately not that persuasive given the statistics I shared earlier. The key question for us moving forward is, how do we build a political constituency to support traffic safety improvements? I think one promising avenue is to target the parents of teenagers and preteens. Parents naturally want their children to be independent, and many of them would like to not have to purchase a car and insurance for their teens. Another possibility that may work is to try to convince people who are cocooning in their cars that they have lost something by avoiding the dangers of walking. I worry that doing so will be very difficult. There is a sort of societal forgetting that walking was once a normal way of life. And moreover, there's a risk that if we only tailor to middle-class concerns, we may never actually address the core concerns of people walking. We might, for instance, see the bulk of traffic safety improvements co-opted for improving recreational facilities. I want to return to this idea that traffic safety improvements are inconvenient. That phrase, everything else equal, is doing a lot of work here. Essentially, I mean that we are unlikely to succeed if we try to simply lower speed limits while keeping our land use and travel patterns the same. It will simply take longer to do anything and everything. Instead, we need a collection of changes that reduce the need for people to travel so far and so fast through so many places. This includes making nearby places more attractive to visit. This will likely involve a mix of carrots and sticks, and it involves many policy tools outside of the direct focus of many traffic safety experts. I'm thinking things like eliminating minimum parking requirements so that new places can be built, easing restrictions on food trucks and farmers markets, and allowing small businesses to locate in established neighborhoods. Finally, I want to leave you with 3 questions. Would Americans be more on board with traffic safety if they were less overworked? Our European peers have embraced traffic safety to a greater degree than Americans. To what extent is that because they are a bit less harried? Relatedly, what would cities and neighborhoods look like if we actually embraced speeds that were safe for the human body? Physically, how would they change? And finally, universally slower streets would reshape location preferences for households and businesses. How can we anticipate that and proactively address concerns about inequality and displacement? That's all I have for today. I'm really looking forward to discussing these ideas with you.